Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here involved in a serious game of fetch with Mildred, who is like running around here below my feet. And we all know what's important. First there's the game of fetch, and then there's, doing what I'm here to do, which is talk about music. The old saying, right? Dogs have owners, but cats have staff. Well, I'm a member of the staff. We're talking today about, Derek Solomon's Haydn Symphony Clump, reissued by Sony. Now, this is not to be confused with the Max Goberman Haydn Symphony Clump, also reissued by Sony. They look rather similar. In fact, look at the actual sleeves. Whoa, baby, they're exactly the same. Why dump a good design when you have one, right? It can be a little bit confusing. Goberman has 45 symphonies and 3 overtures on 14 CDs, whereas Solomon's, with L'Estro Armonico, his little pickup period instrument group, has 49 symphonies on 18 newly remastered CDs. The difference, of course, is repeats. Solomon's takes all of them. Goberman doesn't. So you've got quite a different amount of symphonies per disc. Now, the Solomon set, I just was showing this because I just think it's kind of amusing and interesting. This is like the Haydn color scheme now forevermore, at least on Sony. So here's the deal. These things came out in the 80s, I believe it was. Yes, between 1980 and 1986. And it's just such a shame that this series stopped what it did. It was a shame with Goberman. It's always a shame when you only get a clump and not a complete edition when they start but never finish. Haydn has got to have the most unfinished symphony editions of any composer because, of course, he wrote so many and the money always runs out. It's just inevitable, it seems. But, at the time these came out, it was, the early digital era. And the technology was still a little iffy sometimes, although these were very nicely recorded. They sound very good. You don't have to worry about that. But it's kind of intriguing to me that, Sony was really issuing attractive. They finally figured out that people wanted a classy product, not crap, with horrible pressings. And they had beautiful cover art. They were in shiny, nice boxes and pressed with decent vinyl that didn't automatically warp and have clicks and pops. It was really a beautiful series. Of course, it stopped after a few issues, and that was the end of it. Some of these were never issued, actually, on CD. I don't have the original LPs anymore, so I can't do an immediate comparison, but I do know there was no way. There were 49 of them originally. They are grouped by type, to put it that way. There would have been more series. It began with the Morzin symphonies, and those were the first ones that came out. Haydn's first symphonies were written for Count Morzin, and to the extent we know what they were, and we think we know what most of them were, those were in the first couple of sets. And then they went on to the Sturm und Drang symphonies, and some of the other ones like that. They would have certainly gone on to early Esterhazy period, late Esterhazy, London, Paris, all that stuff. But they didn't. They never got there, which is a terrible shame because these are largely very, very good performances. I like them. I liked them back then. I like them even more now compared to other period instrument people. What are the virtues in general? Then we'll talk about which symphonies are in here. I don't think I need to rattle off all 49 of them, do I? No, I don't think I should have to. But there are some beautiful ones. And by the way, if you stream these, like on Presto, you'll find that they're grouped in 5 or 6 separate downloads by Morzin, Sturm und Drang, those things. They're actually done that way. And so by they're like color coded, as you will notice here. So you can get them that way if you're streaming or doing that kind of thing, or downloading them digitally. You don't get just one giant box. So what are the virtues of these performances in general? The virtues are very, very easy to enumerate. First of all, they're not too fast. This is a big deal, a really big deal, because today's period instrument folk often play these symphonies simply as fast as humanly possible. The allegros and prestos just fly by, and then the andantes don't have any time to, create a sort of vocal warmth in their melodic lines and whatnot. That is extremely annoying to me, and it should be to you, because these symphonies are full of juicy detail, full of beautiful harmonic effects that need a little bit of time to register. They can't all just fly by in a blur. So that's one issue. The second issue is balances. Yes, balances. Now, you talk about balances. One of the ironies of this silliness is that people think that because they use teeny tiny orchestras, you have like greater clarity. It's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. When you're only scoring for strings, 2 oboes, 2 horns, and maybe a bassoon, you hear everything. You always hear everything. There's no way you're covering anything up. Solos are always solos. When the oboes double the violins, you hear the change in timbre. I mean, it's just so silly to think that there's any advantage in clarity by using these teeny, 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 tiny little ensembles. In fact, quite often you have just the opposite. In period instrument performances, you have horns that are way too loud. You have a continuo harpsichord part, which is insanely prominent, like concerto type, instead of discreetly in the background, as it should be. I mean, if you've ever heard a harpsichord with an orchestra, it's usually, it blends in on the bottom there. It's not a solo concerto type thing, or it shouldn't be. Although, of course, there were harpsichords that were built that had, very powerful sonority. But in this context. So here, everything is in balance. When they have trumpets and timpani, the trumpets and timpani cut through the texture. You hear them perfectly clearly, but they don't overwhelm the tune. You've got the trumpets and timpani. They only do fanfare things. They do dum-ba-da-dum-bum-bum, dum-ba-da-dum. And meanwhile, there's a theme on top of that, which you're supposed to hear. Well, in these performances, they are far more intelligently balanced than one normally finds in period instrument performances. And I also like that very much. Finally, there is the continuo. That continuo. Oh, what to do with the continuo. Current scholarship holds that you shouldn't have any continuo at all. I like that. I think that's wonderful. I think probably sometimes there was and sometimes there wasn't. There wasn't a real conductor. Haydn conducted from the keyboard, as they say, and that is sometimes adduced as evidence that you needed to have a harpsichord in there somewhere. Well, that's not necessarily true. He could have done many things at the keyboard. He could have played along. Probably did in some cases. He could have done something to fill in if the ensemble was creaky in certain spots. But quite often concerts in those days, as a rule, frankly, they were mixed affairs. You didn't just have symphonies. You had concertos, cembalo concertos. You had soloists with, singing arias or songs or other things, because they were small events, remember, and private events as often as not. And you had, improvisations and people playing keyboard pieces and all kinds of things. So you needed to have a keyboard instrument there to do all kinds of things. And so if Haydn was leading, he either played the violin. We know in the Farewell Symphony, for example, he played the violin. So who played the harpsichord? He was playing the violin. At the end of the Farewell Symphony, he may have started on a harpsichord and then switched to violin. It was all so much less formal than it is today. So you can't be dogmatic about it, and they're not. They use a harpsichord for the Morzin symphonies, and for the Sturm und Drangs, they follow basically what H.C. Robbins Landon's suggestions were when they did the Dorati cycle, which is that at some point in the middle of the Sturm und Drang period or around the Sturm und Drang period, they leave out the harpsichord, which makes perfect sense. The music doesn't need it. It really doesn't need it at all. But, in the interest of trying to create some sort of effective sonic frame, I understand plonking it in a little bit or not. But the bottom line is that it's never a solo concerto continuo. It doesn't detract from what the actual instruments who have the melodic line are doing. And that is also extremely significant. So what do you get in here? Well, it's just boring to read off a list, isn't it? But, there's some really marvelous performances. The Schoolmaster I was listening to just the other day is absolutely delightful. The Sturm und Drangs go really well. La Passione, which is like number 49, that's lots of fun. Maria Teresa is fabulously exciting with the crazy horns at the opening. I could go on, but there's no need to. This is a really, really fine set. It was a wonderful project. We're lucky that we have what we do. And I would recommend, if you like Haydn symphonies and you want them on period instruments, it's a big difference between the kind of period instrument performances we usually get today. And I think to a certain extent, to a large degree, these are far more musical and more effective than the average, today's average. But there are, of course, other wonderful period instrument Haydn performances all over the place now. So, we don't have to be too dogmatic about that. But yes, they have survived quite well. It's wonderful to re-encounter them again. If you missed them the first time around, here's your chance. Take advantage of it while it lasts, folks. God knows how long that will be. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me, and take care.